All right, let's move forward and let's talk a little bit about groove.
Groove.
And what I like to call the truth about locking. This big can of worms of like, when people talk about playing in the pocket and locking, and specifically, let's talk about how as it relates between the connection between a drummer and a bass player, how we decide on a groove and just when are we locking.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that when you're a young player and you're coming up, one of the pieces of advice you get is that the kick drum and the bass line need to line up at every moment. Is that what you heard?
That was the first thing I learned. And like,
Right.
that's like, rule number one of, playing in a band the first time you're sitting there playing in a rhythm section. And for me, that was probably like about like 9, 10 years old. Through school was like, make sure that everything you're doing, primarily the kick, is locked in exactly with what that bass player is playing. Like very uniformed.
And I would say that that's not totally correct, right?
I would agree 100%.
Right.
I think it's a great starting place.
Right. I think you need to learn to be able to lock the kick drum and the bass line together. But if you overdo that, you kind of ruin the groove, right?
I think it can be the absolute biggest groove killer. Like in terms of a good place of learning when you're first approaching the instrument, it's great. It allows you to listen in and understand what the other person's doing, and also just as a team, like have like a primary goal together. But like as your ears develop, like it's like actually the last thing I want to hear in most cases. I want to hear times when the bass and drums are connecting, and also when they're doing something different. Like I guess that's why I wasn't a marching band fan of like everybody just walking around doing the same thing together all the time.
There's
like,
something bigger, like fatter, created. I think when it's not 100% together, when it's a little I don't want to say looser, but if I play a couple eighth notes, you don't necessarily play those eighth notes, both of those with me. Maybe you do a quarter note or the opposite.
Not playing together doesn't mean that something is disconnected. By any means. Like what I'm usually listening for is the points to where I could contribute something, and I'm going to talk a lot, like I always do, about pushing air. Like the advantage, especially as a drummer, that I have with that kick drum is the ability to push air out and forward. So if I'm here, I want to be able to grab the notes inside the bass groove that need to be emphasized. It's punctuation. Like the bass pattern doesn't need me playing kick drum being the Energizer Bunny on top of everything that's being played. It's just going to sound cluttered. Like, you've already got that. And even frequency wise, we're living in the same world. The bass drum and the bass guitar are named appropriately.
Exactly.
So if I'm not adding anything, I don't want to get in the way. I can let the bass carry it. Like even like grace notes, if the bass is playing boom boom, I would just maybe grab don't go. You've got the pickups, and that also is always like, realistically another margin of error. It's another spot, it's great sometimes when you connect, but it's also terrible when you don't connect. And things start
like a
running.
flam, right? Yeah, just it's not working that way.
It's just taking up like everything just constantly when you play in a busy manner like that, to where you're trying to play everything together. It's too much responsibility that I think you don't need to have. It clutters up your groove. It all just takes up sonic real estate,
Right.
So, I think it's really good to connect and go like, all right, well, he's got that. So now I'm going to either hit the things that I think I could push some air and complement and accent those notes in the groove, or maybe I can play in the gaps, like, fill up those spaces. And I think sometimes too, when someone is developing a cool, intelligent groove, it allows you to use space and not have to compensate. So overall, when we're developing a groove, in terms of the parts that we're playing, we're trying to find some sort of agreement again on what we can each individually play together, but then also not try to constantly be on top of each other, and let each other have some space to move around and be musical on our own too. The cool part of playing with good players, especially when you played with someone like we played together for a long time, there's that element of trust, to where, all right, they're gonna make. They're gonna make really good decisions. So I don't need to do something. I don't need to be active. I don't need to be inspiring. I'm gonna let the other person play their part forward, and I'm just gonna try to find a way to support it rather than
as well as recognizing when that role needs to be flipped, and it's like, okay, he's toning down what he's doing. I need to step up and carry this pulse, keeping that continuing forward in the forward motion of the song. If you're breaking it down and maybe the drums are completely out or simplified, and then all of a sudden some of that real estate opens up and you could choose to fill it or you could choose not to. But always being in sync, doing the same thing, just kind of doesn't work. It kind of
and like the one thing I will add on that though is like because now we're starting to talk a little bit about like concepts like space,
right?
And and like I want to make sure that we're clear on good decisions and not trying to be overthinking things, or as I like to call it, cute. Of going like, oh, I'm gonna play so little now because I am being the mature, responsible musician, and I'm going to show just how much space I can exercise.
Right,
like,
being cute.
Yeah, it's not a game. It's about trying to make good decisions. When someone's doing something awesome, let them be awesome and try to support that as opposed to just trying to play this game. Like no one's gonna think that's better. Think of the big picture and think about how things translate forward and what's the best groove for the song. And if someone's got something that's complimenting that overall big picture, let them do it.
So listening to what's happening in a broader thing than just your specific role, so that you're bringing. You said playing cute and stuff. So like being serious about what you play. Like every note you play is sincere, and that it's serving the song in that moment, and it's not about what kind of thing you could do to show off in any sort of fashion. Whether it's like I'm going to show how musical I could be, or I'm going to get this really fast lick in that I've worked up, and the girl in the front row is going to love it.
Yeah, a lot of it sounds really cliche, but it's like I think. Especially being sidemen, working with a lot of people like we do, like you really do learn that it's not about you. And, the people that work, or at least the people I want to play with, are like, not people that like even say like, it's about you and then it's about you. I'm so giving. It's like, no, just have a good overall grasp of the big picture and have some pride in what you're doing and care. Have that sincerity.
Right. There's that balance, I think, in all these things we're talking about of you don't want to be just overly giving or overly taking. Or I
think the big thing is you don't like you want to have an objective, not an agenda.
Yeah.
Not
that's a great catchphrase there. I like that.
It's just you want it to be honest and you want to be sincere, and I think people really do pick up on that.
Yeah.
And I want to play with people like that. All right, now that we've been talking a little bit about locking, let's play some examples.
Yeah.
So why don't you play a bass groove right now, and what I'm going to do is we're going to do that the first thing you learn, where we're going to try to hit as many of the notes together as possible. Okay. So why don't you play a line, keep it going, and I'll jump on.
All right, here.
So it works. It's cool, especially when you have a swinging player. Like you can make that feel really good.
Right.
But let's try another option now.
Okay.
To where now I'm gonna just really outline and simplify the groove. So I'm just gonna pick a few of the notes.
Okay, I'm gonna stay where I'm at.
You stay where you're at. And let's see how if things rub and see if it changes the overall feel.
Gotcha. That sounds heavier.
It's heavier, and I guess the big thing that we're finding with this is it's all just different.
Right.
So you're not just stuck with like one static way that like you're that you have to handle the groove. So like as the drummer, I could change some things up a little bit, and that way the groove is outlined a little bit differently, and it's going to translate differently.
And that decision might make it might be dependent on what else is happening there. If there's a keyboard player, guitar player doing something complicated as well, then that simpler groove you played probably is going to help the situation a little more than everybody being all excited on the same thing.
Totally, and I think the other way now, no matter what agreement is made on the groove, is a way to bring more life to that groove is by actually examining how long the phrases are, and what helps phrases and can make them be longer, or at least appear longer, is through adding in like fills and embellishments.
Right.
So
let's do some of that.
Let's do that. And I'll play some fills, but I'm gonna try to leave some room for you to play some fills and kind of move in and around the pulse and in and around that groove that you've already preset.
Got it. So right there, I did like a kind of a smaller fill on the first 4-bar section. In my mind, I'm thinking 8 bars. So I had like a little guy to break up the 8 bars.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that 8 bars, I put in a bigger fill to kind of signify, here's the end of that 8 bars.
Yeah, and I think as a drummer too, it's when I'm approaching fills, I have a really big responsibility to the band and the listener to really make those phrases present. And know that, like, when we say phrases, that we're turning around after 4 bars or 2 bars, or even if it's like you're playing a 1-bar phrase. If I put a fill at the end, or even you do at the end of the 4th bar, it makes things feel longer and not as like such a fast cycle. And like a lot of the stuff we're talking about, for me personally, you can play busy fills and everything, but I'm a fan of simple functional fills. I'd rather try to get away with those more than get away with the busy ones.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of maturity and musicianship, but it helps kind of make the phrases feel a little bit bigger.
Okay, you want to do another one where you're more the fill guy?
Okay.
Yeah?
Let's try that.
Okay.
See how that works. See if I can not mess this up. So again, take what you can from it. There's really no wrong or right. Everything is just dictated on the situation, and try to make the right decision. Don't overplay if you're going to step on something, but keep the rest of the band, the listener in mind, and make sure that groove and that pulse is translating above anything you do.